Then, a skinny, balding man with a long beard and a wrinkled, tanned appearance approached a small Latino boy. He began talking to the boy about cool toys he had in his van. Even at that age, I understood stranger danger, yet to my shame, I stood there in shock. What was even more startling was when the boy agreed to follow him to where he kept the toys. I distinctly remember thinking, is this boy actually going with this man? This might be a brief story, but I felt compelled to share it to get it off my chest. Everyone I've told who was present that day has never fully believed me. The incident occurred at a mall, where a new, charming rubber playground had just been constructed. I was 6 years old at the time, happily playing while my family shopped only a few feet away. Doesn't he know what stranger danger is? If that didn't make things worse, the boy was so excited that he went ahead to invite his brother around the same age as I am, and they went off together. I honestly didn't know what I could do. Run off and into this giant mall after them and get lost. If I told my mom what was going on, would she even believe me? Where were their parents? But as I stood there, watching them walk off together in the distance, so did the opportunity. I stopped playing and walked into the store where my mom was and told her in a shy voice what happened. I was struggling to find the words, but I told her along the lines of, "Hey Mom, I saw something strange happen." This only made me more distressed. I could feel the time to act slipping away. I remember telling her, "I'm serious. There was a creepy man over there talking to children." I pointed in the direction where they had been. I watched her face intently and saw a flicker of understanding, but then doubt settled in and she brushed it off. I watched an ugly old man walk off with 2 boys, the kind you'd warned me about, the noose kind of men. She just looked at me and smiled, not seeming to fully grasp what I was saying. I pressed the issue, but she only replied, "Don't worry, I'm almost done shopping for shoes." She then started showering me with compliments, using that playful baby talk tone moms use. Then, that was the end of that encounter. A few days later, I was watching the news with my mom, and I saw the same boys I felt placed in the spotlight again on what to do, but I knew my mom would never take me seriously. I was only 6, and my family were illegals who wouldn't want to involve themselves with the police. Anyway, I asked my mom what she thought about those 2 boys, but she had no opinion because she wasn't paying attention to the TV anyway. I often look back with regret at what I could have done. Parents may teach their kids what to do when these incidents happen to them, but I don't know what I could do as a witness. I felt as if I had done what I could do, telling my mom, but I was too young in her eyes to be taken seriously. Screw that playground. By the way, I never ended up playing there after that incident. I'm 21 now, but I still see parents dropping off their kids there and shopping around the area. What a dumb place to have anyway, as it only encourages such negligence. Second, I wrote this when I was very angry with my mother. The story itself is true. My mom and I had a lot of conflict because of this, and my deteriorating mental health. We both had our issues. She was a mother of 3, doing her best, despite her husband being absent for weeks at a time. She was practically a single mother, even though she would get mad when I tried to point this out to her. I've come to see she was dealing with a lot herself, and just couldn't quite deal with it, if that makes sense. In recent years, we've come to find an understanding, and I've actually spoken about the incident. I do feel guilty for how angry I was at her. A lot of it was due to my own misconceptions and a certain terrible ex-husband's manipulations. Years later, as I randomly reflect on this post, I'm editing this story. I doubt anyone will see this, but on the off chance they do, I want to clarify a few things. First, I apologize for how terribly written this is. Looking back, I cringe at the numerous spelling errors. Normally, I try to cover for my mother, but as I've grown older, I kind of blame her a bit, especially after what she said. She just loves to invalidate her oldest daughter. I'd say I was around 8 at the time. This took place at the time. We had to get mail from the post office in town, and so seeing my mom get the mail, my brain decided, wow, I want to be cool and get the mail like mom, that childish. He might have been the one to be angry for me when I tell him this story, but after hearing how I treated my mom, I see why she never told them. Anyways, that's all. I just wanted to put that down as it's bothered me for a while to get this started. To some, it might not sound scary, but having a stranger press against you and block you from leaving is horrifying, especially when young. I needed to prove my maturity. After much begging, my mom finally allowed me to get the mail. It must have been a weekend, because the post office itself was closed, but mail could still be retrieved, and staff were present. As we slowly pulled up to the post office, I asked my mom if I could get the mail. After maybe 3 to 5 minutes of trying and failing, I finally unlocked it. I was so happy that I disregarded the man staring. As I grabbed the mail with a quick click of the lock, I closed the box and began to walk away. I found the gaze of the man as he looked at me, a crooked smile across his face. He gave me weird vibes even as a kid, but still I gave him a quick smile and wave. Bad move. The man smiled back, revealing his stained teeth. I walked past him and went to the mailbox. Me being me though, I forgot what he was, what, and began fumbling awkwardly as the others grabbing mail left the building. She nodded yes and handed me the keys, the mail key, along with several other loud jingly keys. I jumped out of our old van and ran up the ramp to the building, completely bypassing the stairs. Inside, I saw a woman and a man getting their mail. Turning to my side, I noticed an older man sitting in the corner, staring at me. This might be a brief story, but I felt compelled to share it to get it off my chest. Everyone I've told who was present that day has never fully believed me. The incident occurred at a mall, where a new, charming rubber playground had just been constructed. I was 6 years old at the time, happily playing while my family shopped only a few feet away. Then, a skinny, balding man with a long beard and a wrinkled, tanned appearance approached a small Latino boy. He began talking to the boy about cool toys he had in his van. Even at that age, I understood stranger danger, yet to my shame, I stood there in shock. What was even more startling was when the boy agreed to follow him to where he kept the toys. I distinctly remember thinking, is this boy actually going with this man? Doesn't he know what stranger danger is? If that didn't make things worse. The boy was so excited that he went ahead to invite his brother around the same age as I am, and they went off together. I honestly didn't know what I could do. Run off and into this giant mall after them and get lost. If I told my mom what was going on, would she even believe me? Where were their parents? But as I stood there, watching them walk off together in the distance, so did the opportunity. I stopped playing and walked into the store where my mom was and told her in a shy voice what happened. I was struggling to find the words, but I told her along the lines of, "Hey Mom, I saw something strange happen. I watched an ugly old man walk off with 2 boys, the kind you'd warned me about, the noose kind of men." She just looked at me and smiled, not seeming to fully grasp what I was saying. I pressed the issue, but she only replied, "Don't worry, I'm almost done shopping for shoes." She then started showering me with compliments, using that playful baby talk tone moms use. This only made me more distressed. I could feel the time to act slipping away. I remember telling her, "I'm serious. There was a creepy man over there talking to children." I pointed in the direction where they had been. I watched her face intently and saw a flicker of understanding, but then doubt settled in and she brushed it off. Then, that was the end of that encounter. A few days later, I was watching the news with my mom, and I saw the same boys I felt placed in the spotlight again on what to do, but I knew my mom would never take me seriously. I was only 6, and my family were illegals who wouldn't want to involve themselves with the police. Anyway, I asked my mom what she thought about those 2 boys, but she had no opinion because she wasn't paying attention to the TV anyway. I often look back with regret at what I could have done. Parents may teach their kids what to do when these incidents happen to them, but I don't know what I could do as a witness. I felt as if I had done what I could do, telling my mom, but I was too young in her eyes to be taken seriously. Screw that playground. By the way, I never ended up playing there after that incident. I'm 21 now, but I still see parents dropping off their kids there and shopping around the area. What a dumb place to have anyway, as it only encourages such negligence. Years later, as I randomly reflect on this post, I'm editing this story. I doubt anyone will see this, but on the off chance they do, I want to clarify a few things. First, I apologize for how terribly written this is. Looking back, I cringe at the numerous spelling errors. Second, I wrote this when I was very angry with my mother. The story itself is true. My mom and I had a lot of conflict because of this, and my deteriorating mental health. We both had our issues. She was a mother of 3, doing her best, despite her husband being absent for weeks at a time. She was practically a single mother, even though she would get mad when I tried to point this out to her. I've come to see she was dealing with a lot herself, and just couldn't quite deal with it, if that makes sense. In recent years, we've come to find an understanding, and I've actually spoken about the incident. I do feel guilty for how angry I was at her. A lot of it was due to my own misconceptions and a certain terrible ex-husband's manipulations. He might have been the one to be angry for me when I tell him this story, but after hearing how I treated my mom, I see why she never told them. Anyways, that's all. I just wanted to put that down as it's bothered me for a while to get this started. To some, it might not sound scary, but having a stranger press against you and block you from leaving is horrifying, especially when young. Normally, I try to cover for my mother, but as I've grown older, I kind of blame her a bit, especially after what she said. She just loves to invalidate her oldest daughter. I'd say I was around 8 at the time. This took place at the time. We had to get mail from the post office in town, and so seeing my mom get the mail, my brain decided, wow, I want to be cool and get the mail like mom, that childish. I needed to prove my maturity. After much begging, my mom finally allowed me to get the mail. It must have been a weekend, because the post office itself was closed, but mail could still be retrieved, and staff were present. As we slowly pulled up to the post office, I asked my mom if I could get the mail. She nodded yes, and handed me the keys, the mail key, along with several other loud, jingly keys. I jumped out of our old van and ran up the ramp to the building, completely bypassing the stairs. Inside, I saw a woman and a man getting their mail. Turning to my side, I noticed an older man sitting in the corner, staring at me. He gave me weird vibes, even as a kid, but still I gave him a quick smile and wave. Bad move. The man smiled back, revealing his stained teeth. I walked past him and went to the mailbox. Me being me though, I forgot what he was, and began fumbling awkwardly as the others grabbing mail left the building. After maybe 3 to 5 minutes of trying and failing, I finally unlocked it. I was so happy that I disregarded the man staring. As I grabbed the mail with a quick click of the lock, I closed the box and began to walk away. I found the gaze of the man as he looked at me, a crooked smile across his face. A decade later, the memory of his gaze still sends shivers down my spine. I pressed my open hand against the door, pushing, when suddenly 2 arms wrapped around me. One hand forcefully pulled the door shut, while the other clutched my upper chest, like my collarbone, pulling me into a tight, unwelcome, and terrifying embrace. I froze, unsure of what to do. I had always been taught to respect adults, and I did. He reeked of alcohol so strongly that I coughed a few times. After a moment of just holding me there, he began to speak. His words terrified me so deeply, but now I only remember fragments of what he said, and I wish I didn't. He said, Hey, where are you going?" He spoke almost passive-aggressively. "Oh, I have to go. My mom is waiting for me," I stuttered. "Oh, okay." He sounded defeated and began to let me go before I could break away. He held me tighter again, tighter than before. Wait. I have a dog, you know." He had that stupid girl in his face, that scary grin. Me. "Oh, that's cool. Yeah. and you should come with me and you can play with him," he encouraged. The scary thing is, I almost went with him at that moment. The next maybe 8 minutes felt like hours as he let me go and pulled me back hard into him. His scruffy beard and soft dirty coat brushing against me. The details make my head hurt to remember, but he kept telling me no, almost ordering me to go with him. Finally, he seemed to snap. "All right, you're coming with me." "What? But I need my mom. I have her keys and she's waiting for me. Please." That was still my priority. Her keys in mouth. "Nope, you're calling with me now." In a moment of his weakness, I broke free, bolting towards my mother's car. I slammed the door shut, startling both her and my brother, shaking and crying. I dropped my phone onto the car floor. I shakily retrieved it and handed everything to my mom, who demanded to know what had happened. I recounted the entire ordeal, and her expression turned to anger. I was relieved to have her on my side. Through my tears, I looked outside and saw a man staring at me through the car window from the building's top ramp. My panic intensified as he began to approach, and my mother, noticing him, stopped me. What was her reason for thinking? He was completely harmless. He felt the bottom of the ramp and tripped. My mom laughed at the creep and started driving away while she tried to comfort me, saying things like, "He was a harmless old drunk man and he didn't hurt you." Now, years later, I brought it up to my dad when I was at his house. My parents divorced 3 years at this incident, thinking he knew, but my mom never told him, so he was angry. He was pissed. My mom didn't come for me sooner, and that she hadn't done more. I told him not to confront my mom on this, and he agreed. Now, not long after telling my dad, I brought it up to my mom. My mom said I was being a drama queen, and that I would never get hurt, that he never tried anything. I was furious, but now I don't know if I should be. I mean, I know drunk slurring, but this was almost spiteful, and his tone was demanding. My questions I'll leave off with are, what were his intentions? Ants. Am I right to be mad? Nearly 13. I was being raised by my strict grandparents in a small Florida tourist town. They had raised my mother, their older daughter, and her sister, my aunt. Because their adult daughters had faced challenges, my grandparents were determined to ensure I didn't follow the same path, a do-over, if you will. They were very strict, but my aunt, having her life together at the time, was a close confidante. She understood what it was like to be raised under strict rules, as they had raised her too. Being my only aunt, she made sure our time together was always exciting. I would spend Saturday nights at her place. We'd go to the pier, and she would even let me hang out with my middle school boyfriend, who always managed to find me. My grandparents, of course, were completely unaware of these activities, believing I was simply spending quality time with my aunt and giving them a break. It was nice that I had a younger female figure, since my mom wasn't around. One night, when we were out having fun, my aunt met this guy, and they really hit it off. He was very nice and introduced himself to me. He went by JR and at first was kind of charming in a talker. They exchanged numbers after hanging out at Wildlands. Then we went home and went to bed. They ended up going out a bit more, and my aunt had really liked Gior. He took her to his home and introduced her to his father and showed her around his lands. He lived out in the woods in the middle of nowhere. I have lived in this town for 30 years, and I still to this day couldn't tell you where it is. I was only there once. He was teaching my aunt how to shoot a gun. I remember her shoulder rocking back with the impact of the shot, and it surprising her. He had these weird flamenco dancing clothes in his closet. It was all seemingly harmless. I mean, everyone has their quirks. About 10 days, maybe 2 weeks later, we were again to appear out by the payphone, talking about what to do that night and what to get for dinner. My aunt and Junior, both in their late 20s or early 30s, were at the pier. While I know my aunt loves me, I can imagine there were times my presence was an inconvenience. Junior started talking about having painkillers and offered me one. I declined, stating I had a high tolerance for pain and didn't need them. with a huge smile. He then asked if he could test my pain tolerance, assuring me he wouldn't truly hurt me and was just having fun. This bastard then twisted my arm behind my back until I heard a pop. I started to cry, and he laughed, saying, "Ah, sweetheart, I was only playing." He said he had a high tolerance. I guess I was stronger than I thought I was being. I'm sorry. No need to ruin the good time we were all having. I go in the private peer office, which my granddad managed, crying. My aunt comes in and lets me know that she thinks it's messed up too, and that she talked to him about it. She goes back outside, and he asks her what she's up to. That night, she tells him that she isn't sure if I'm staying over because of what just happened. I was wanting about going home. I was pissed that she hadn't decked him right there for hurting me. Well, he tells her that she should meet him under, let's call it the Sunset Bridge, at 2 a.m. on the other side of town. He says the stars are beautiful, and you can listen and hear the fish. He also tells her he would love to see it with her, and they can dance under the moon. We were all from a fishing family, and lived in a fishing town, so fishing activities under the bridge at late times weren't necessarily something that threw up a red flag. If it's dark and late, there won't be people around hugging all the fish. She tells him maybe, and we leave. I decide to spend the night after all later, sneaking in, only if she'll pick up my boyfriend Charlie, playing up on guilt points. She calls him when she gets home before he made our arrangement about Charlie, and says that she can come but she'll have me with her. He groans and is like, fine. All right, I guess she can come. Maybe she'll get tired and sleep in the car about an hour after she called Junior. Upon first asking my aunt about Charlie, she agreed. She lovingly sat down with me, hugged me, and touched my face, apologizing for what happened to my arm. My aunt was an amazing woman, and I love her very much. She then called him again, telling him not to worry because she was picking up Charlie. This meant I'd have my own entertainment, and they could have their time together. He flew into a rage, sputtering and cussing about how complicated it had become. All he wanted was an intimate meeting, not a damn family reunion. He ranted about not wanting to babysit a 13-year-old kid and her 14-year-old boyfriend before hanging up after calling her a crazy bitch. She bewildered hangs up the phone and tells me what happened. We go about our night with pizza rolls and PlayStation, and things are fine. Calls her a few more times and drives by the house for a couple of weeks, but my aunt was having none of it. After a while, he left our lives just as swiftly as he had come. The whole affair lasted only a month, if even that 3 weeks maybe. And so all in all, it wasn't the craziest experience she has had with a man. JR was soon forgotten, and we went about our business. We fast forward 2 years later. I'm almost out of middle school. My aunt had moved to a city about 40 miles away. I lived with my grandparents, whose strict rules I had learned to navigate over time. One day, my friend Frank and I missed the school bus. We called our high school friend Darla, who arrived in her beautiful big red truck. Riding in the cab, I savored the freedom and the wind as we smoked cigarettes, laughed, and listened to the radio. The time we would have spent on the bus was just enough to grab food from a taco drive-thru. After cruising around for a bit, Darla dropped us off at our separate houses, Frank's being just down the road from mine. We had a great time that day. She dropped me off first. My grandparents came outside, and they were heavily confused, the sight of an unknown vehicle, and even more so when they saw I had gotten out of it, after letting her be the one to explain. She was older, cooler, and more responsible. My parents thanked her for being kind enough to take me home. They said how lucky I was, that she had just happened to be there to help me get home. The things we do to our grandparents. That was the last time we ever saw my friends. She didn't show up for work for 5 days. I can't speak for everyone, but I assume she had just run away. Darla's parents were going through a nasty divorce. The dad had a hot new girlfriend, and the mother was very bitter about it. Rightfully so. I guess it was embarrassing for all of the kids. Her truck wasn't left behind. I figured she got tired of her parents acting like infants and took off. I missed her, but she was in a whole other league of freedom and coolness. Life at 16 was vastly different from 14, especially with different schools. I wished her well, perhaps even a bit envious. She'd left this town while I remained. I hadn't heard from her for 2 weeks, until around 9 o'clock one night, my grandparents received a phone call instructing them to turn on the news. Darla's body was discovered in the woods. She had been strangled and left there. I don't even know for how long. I was devastated, but also found some comfort in our last shared experience, though profound sadness and horror quickly overtook me. She was so young, barely older than me, and just weeks away from her 17th birthday. It was a very sad time for our town. The good and the bad news is, they caught the guy that had done it. He confessed after some very incriminating evidence, and during his questioning also confessed to killing his girlfriend who had been missing for about 8 years, and also his father. When they showed his mugshot on the screen and said his name, I swear I almost passed out. They're clear as day on the screen staring back at me. It was a picture of Jalka. I had no idea they knew each other. I can't even imagine what would have happened if we had gone under the bridge that night. Investigation Discovery Channel did a piece on it a couple of years back. I was shocked to see it on the TV. The terrifying memories flooded back, prompting me to document them. I now have a profound appreciation for life, understanding how narrowly I escaped death. My aunt survived, allowing us to create new memories. I currently enjoy a wonderful life with my husband and 3 boys, a life that might not have existed had that night unfolded differently. This is a forbidden family secret, a story I was never meant to discover or share. When my grandfather was in his late 20s or early 30s, he became the principal of an elementary school. Despite his youth, he was a natural leader, an excellent principal, adored by everyone. I can attest to that, as I attended multiple award ceremonies for him, and the respect and admiration he received was crazy. There was a young boy at the school who was having behavioral issues in class, and my grandfather saw that the kid didn't have a lot of parental support, so he called in his father and had a talk with him about spending more time with his son in just a general parenting session. It turned out that all the boy needed was his dad's attention, and after a few weeks he was a happy model student. Whenever my grandfather would leave school late, he would see the dad was playing basketball with his son after he got home from work. It was one of those moments that he took pride in being able to make a difference in people's lives. Not all problems have simple solutions. My grandfather faced a difficult situation with Stanley, the janitor, who was frequently showing up to work drunk. Stanley was an alcoholic with a violent temper, and despite multiple attempts, my grandfather couldn't manage his behavior. Finally, one day, Stanley arrived so intoxicated that my grandfather sent him home and informed the superintendent that he intended to fire him the next morning once Stanley had sobered up. My grandfather warned them to let him handle the situation when Stanley was sober, emphasizing that he was unstable. However, the superintendent, infuriated, decided to call Stanley himself and fire him, disregarding my grandfather's warning and failing to inform him of this action. So he was completely in the dark and thought he could deal with it in the morning. Stanley was furious and went to the school that evening. He searched the offices, my grandfather's included, and tore things apart until he finally had what he wanted. He was in a blaze of fury, and on his way out, he saw the father and his son playing basketball. He walked towards them and pulled something out of his trousers. It was a gun. He then proceeded to shoot the little boy, killing him instantly. The father was so upset, he was hysterically crying, but somehow managed to get the gun away from Stanley and shoot him. My grandfather was called at the elementary school immediately by the police because there were 2 dead bodies. The little boy and Stanley were dead, but what was even worse was the crying from the father and him saying that he couldn't save his son. It was clear that he would never forgive himself for that day. My grandfather was pulled aside by one of the police who had searched Stanley for evidence. They had found a list. They had a hit list of people he intended to kill, along with their addresses, which he'd found after searching their offices. My grandfather was number one on that list. If it hadn't been for that, I would likely never have been born, and my mother and grandmother might have been killed if Stanley had succeeded. To this day, I get goosebumps whenever I hear that story. It's so chilling. My grandfather never spoke another word about it after his initial recounting, and my mother made me swear not to tell him. I knew he carried the weight of that boy's death until the day he died. Edit. I just looked up records online, finally found some information, and spoke with my mother. There was another man who Stanley killed. He had killed another janitor that evening. He had thought the boy and the father had seen him, so then Stanley tried to shoot the father and wrestled with the man to get the gun. In that process, it went off and killed the boy. Sorry for the mistake in this story. It makes it almost worse. This happened almost a year ago, and it's all thanks to my little shit of a husky. She was a super cute 10-pound fluff ball. At the time this happened, I was living in a pet-friendly apartment complex, and I had just bought her. I picked her up around 10 a.m. that morning and went to visit my parents' house so they could meet her. I stayed all day and didn't arrive home until 8 to 8:30 p.m. We walked in and I introduced her to the apartment, played with her, took her to pee, and went to bed. During the night, she woke me up twice to pee and whined a bit since she was in a new environment, but she wasn't too loud, and I quickly calmed her down by putting her on my bed, and she crawled on my head and fell asleep. Since I read that huskies are very active dogs, I decided to take her on her first walk on the sidewalk beside the building. As we started our walk, we passed the side of the building that shows the balconies. I lived on the 3rd floor, and the guy who lives directly below me was standing on his balcony, following me on his phone. I felt a bit weird about it, but I didn't think too much about it, since the landlord had actually told me before. He mentioned to her that he enjoyed me living above because I was quiet. Also, a lot of the tenants in the complex were having a fit over my husky and would just hold her and pet her whenever they saw her. I initially assumed he was filming her to share with friends or discuss with me later. I spent the entire day helping her settle into her new home. As night fell, around 11:30 p.m., I took her out before going to bed. I walked past a red car that was running, but its lights were off, preventing me from seeing who was inside. I didn't dwell on it much, as it wasn't uncommon for people to sit in their cars waiting for someone. Living next to a college meant many students resided in the building, so I thought they might be waiting to head to a party or something. Despite my casual thought, I remained aware of my surroundings, being a young woman alone at night. My puppy finally used the bathroom after 20 minutes of sniffing around, and I picked her up and walked past the car to go inside. The driver's side suddenly opens, and a tall man steps out and yells, "Are you allowed to have that dog?" almost aggressively. I turned around and noticed it was my neighbor, and replied, "Oh yeah, you're allowed to have dogs here." I was confused as to why he was asking that, since he's lived here longer than me, but I answered him anyways. He points at my dog. "No, you dumbass. Did you get permission from the landlord to have that thing?" As soon as he cursed at me, I clutched the dog closer to my chest and just nodded, still confused and now a bit frightened. "Seriously, I know you're lying. You don't have permission. I videotaped you this morning and sent it to the landlord, and she said that she had no clue about her. I know he's lying, because I did tell her about my dog, but I just hadn't paid the deposit yet, since it was the weekend, and she was fine with that." So I explained to him, but he cursed at me more, calling me a lying bitch, saying we kept him up all day and night with her running around and stomping. I know that this was impossible, because the dog, her size, couldn't stomp or make noise to keep him up all night. She has embarked or howled once and just whines at times, but that's not loud enough to keep him up all night, especially since I was asleep next to her and I slept fine. I finally interrupted and apologized to cut the carnival short, because he was just getting more angry as it went on. He pauses and says, "Shut up, you don't mean that, ants." I'm calling the landlord tomorrow to report you and your dog. I swear if she keeps me up again tonight, I'll mess you up. I freeze at that point because I know he meant it. Even though we never had any problems until that day. I've heard him harassing other neighbors, ants, even pulling out a gun on one over their dogs. However, because he's buddy with the landlord and doing drugs and probably having sex, he's never gotten in trouble. Despite being scared, my dumbass suddenly gets pissed off or getting threatened for no reason, and I stammer out, I have permission for this dog, so I'll be there with you tomorrow when you try to report me. You're just upset and lying because you hate dogs, even though you made the stupid choice to live in a pet-friendly apartment. Yes, I know, I was stupid, and the words just vomited out of my mouth. Hey, just go on before you beat your ass. You're not going to do anything tomorrow, but get rid of that damn dog. I didn't know there was someone else in his car. As I stood closer to the driver's side, my fear completely took over, and I just ran away and into the building. I was on the second floor landing when I heard the lobby door slam and footsteps pounding up the stairs. I let out a scream and hurried up the third floor down the hallway and into my apartment. I locked all the locks and put my door stopper against the doorknob. From outside my window, closer towards the end of the hall, I hear laughter, and then they walk away. I locked myself in my bedroom and cuddled my puppy as I cried. I stayed up all night afraid that they would try to break in and kill me and my dog. The next day, I called my mom to pick me up. It didn't come back until 2 weeks later, when I moved out. I brought all of my male cousins for extra protection that day in the ends. I had to move back in with my parents because I was afraid to be out on my own. But I ended up getting my deposit in last month's rent back. I never reported the couple because I didn't know their names and just didn't want to get involved with them anymore. And I felt discouraged because my landlord practically took his side and just rushed the process for me to leave by quickly giving me my money back if I didn't involve her boss or the police. After that day, I learned she wasn't the landlord, but merely the apartment manager. Looking back, I wondered if I could have sued. This past Monday, my co-workers and I returned to our hotel from a day of work out in the field. Rebecca and I walked into our rooms, and as we stood outside of our rooms, I opened mine, and I saw someone in the bathroom. I said hello. Nobody answered. My first instinct was that there was a cleaning lady in there for some reason, and I saw my bag with my clothes in her hands. I said to my co-worker, "There's a woman in my room." Then I asked the woman, "What are you doing with my stuff?" It gets a little fuzzy here because I can't remember everything I said and what she said, but she gets mumbling about how her key still worked, how it still worked, and that's how she got in. I was in shock, and she was obviously very flustered, having been caught mid-robbery. She dropped my bags and fumbled around with her purse and a white plastic bag. By this time, my co-worker was behind me, watching all the insanity unfold. This woman was scrambling and walking towards the door, and I said, "What's in the bag?" thinking it was probably my stuff, and so she said, No, it's just my thanks, just my stuff." "I'll show you," she said, and true to her word, she did. I searched, but found none of my belongings, and still in shock, I let her leave. Upon entering my room, I discovered it had been ransacked. A quick check revealed my electronics were still there, but in the bathroom, my underwear, bikini, and clothes, even my passport, were randomly stuffed into my own bags. Then, on the counter, I saw she had gotten into my medication. Driven by a desperate need to get it back, I bolted out the door in search of her. I ran to the downstairs laundry room and around the hotel's perimeter, but she was nowhere to be found. Realizing she was gone for good, my co-worker and I went to the lobby to report what had happened. And then we called the police. We went back up to my room to wait, and I noticed that there was a metal bat on my bed, a little larger than the one of those novelty wooden bats you can get at a baseball game. But there's also a flashlight on the end. She must have left it behind in her hurry. She also left behind a necklace that must have fallen out of her bag. When she was scrambling with mine, I was mostly freaking out at this point because I thought that she had gone away with my medication that I needed. The police got out there and took our statements and looked around the room as well. One thing that I noticed was that there were bits of drywall in the sink, and I pointed that out to the cops, but none of us really knew where it came from. We started looking at the door in the windows to see if she pried her way in somehow, but there was nothing. So we just kind of went with the idea that she had a spare key or something, even though the hotel front desk was adamant that there was no way that could be the officer that came. Brought 2 more officers as backups because they thought the woman might still be in the vicinity, but after our statements were taken, there was nothing else they could really do, so they left. I sat down to finally make some calls to tell people, and as I'm on the phone, I'm thinking about the drywall in the sink, and it still didn't make sense to me. So I'm on the phone and looking at the drywall in the mirror and on the wall right above it. Then it hit me. I got my coworker and asked her to help me pull out this mirror on the wall, and we took the mirror down, and there's a hole there just big enough for a desperate junkie to squeeze through. I told Brian and Rebecca about my discovery, asking if I should call the police again. My boss mentioned there were still 2 patrol cars in the parking lot, so I went down to inform the officers. The female officer seemed annoyed, but the younger one agreed to investigate. They both came upstairs, peered into the hole, and found a pillow, blankets, cigarettes, clothes, and toothbrushes. This revelation meant a woman had been living in the wall behind my mirror for an unknown duration, having constant access to me in my room. It's difficult to visualize, but there was a 2-foot wide crawl space between the 2 rows of rooms. One of the officers then contacted the original officer to return and photograph the scene. She explained to him what was going on, and all I hear over the radio is "no freaking way." He comes back, takes pictures, and is just as mind-blown as the rest of us. Obviously, we packed up and left immediately. What's even crazier is she has probably been there a long time. The last time we stayed at this hotel, I would randomly smell cigarette smoke, and I assumed somebody was smoking in their bathroom. It was traveling through the vents, but nope, a junkie was smoking just on the other side of the mirror. She had access to the other rooms too. The holes in the walls were from a renovation, and the hotel hadn't properly patched them in, just covered them up with the mirrors. She could have been hanging out in people's rooms when they were gone. Anyways, this was insane, and I'm taking a little time off. This happened a few years ago when I was bartending in college. I was coming home down a stretcher, divided highway at around 3 a.m. when I noticed a car heading towards me in the wrong lane. I doubted myself at first and thought the car was on the other side of the highway. Sure enough, a white Ford sedan passed me at a really high speed, at least 90. As a white Ford sedan driver, I'm used to encountering drunk drivers late at night. I pulled over to let them pass, then realized I should call the police, fearing they might harm themselves or others. After providing the road and mile marker to the dispatcher, they confirmed a car would be sent. Knowing the state police station was nearby, I figured they'd arrive quickly, so I headed home. Re-entering the highway, I spotted lights a few miles ahead. I live in a more rural part of southeastern Pennsylvania, and traffic at 3 a.m.s tend to be truckers and cops. The car gained on me as I was getting up to speed, so I stayed in the right lane and waited to be passed. Instead, they flipped on their high beams, making it uncomfortable to drive, and rode my tailgate. At this point, I thought I was going to be pulled over by the police, especially for the fact, considering I drive a white Ford sedan and had just called about a different white Ford sedan, so I grabbed my registration from the glove box. Suddenly, the car behind me audibly slammed on the brakes and stopped in the middle of the highway. It must have shut off their car because the lights went out and I saw what looked like the same Ford sedan from earlier. Still, I thought this may have been a police car. They have a roof rack, and it could have looked like I had reached for a gun in my glove box or something. I panicked and called 911 for the second time and asked the dispatcher if they had sent a cruiser to investigate. The dispatcher was a bit abrupt, I told her, but she assured me a trooper had been sent out. "We sent a trooper to find the car, sir," she said, I replied, I only ask because someone's following me and acting weird. It could be a cop, and I think I freaked them out by getting my registration. She asked, are you pulled over? No, they didn't turn on their lights. Okay, let me try to reach the trooper we sent out. As she spoke, the car sped towards me again, stopping inches from my bumper. Again their high beams were on, and again they slammed on their brakes. I told the dispatcher, I'm pretty sure this isn't the police behind me. The car sped to my bumper again and turned their high beams on, this time laying on the horn. Hearing this, the dispatcher asked me what was happening. What's happening? Did you honk? No, that's the car behind me. I don't think it's a cop. I'll try to get the trooper again, but I don't think that's him behind you. For some reason, this is what shook me. Before that, I was thinking I would get pulled over and maybe get a ticket. Up until then, I was going the speed limit and trying to avoid getting pulled over. I told the dispatcher, I don't care if I get pulled over, I'm speeding, and if they put their lights on, then I'll pull over. I started to accelerate, and the person behind me just kept up with me. The speed limit was 55, and they kept on my bumper the entire time, but this time they were swerving. I tried to signal for an exit and then bail on it, but they followed at the next exit. I took the off-ramp and continued onto the on-ramp, and the car behind me followed the whole time. I thought about trying to go to a Wawa, a convenience store, or a gas station. That's pretty much the only populated place in southeastern Pennsylvania at 3 a.m., but the dispatcher and I thought that would be unsafe. She was calm and talking to another person, trying to send police to me. The other person, maybe a supervisor, asked if I could drive to the state police station, realizing that I was one exit away. I told her I was coming there, and she said that she would have troopers meet me outside. As I pulled off to the exit, the car followed me. I blew a few red lights trying to get to the police station, and the car tried to pull into the other lane to pass me or pull up alongside me. Once the police station was in view, I put on my turn signal, and the car slammed on its brakes again, turned off its lights, and turned into a parking lot. The incident concluded somewhat uneventfully. Upon reaching the police station, I met the troopers. 2 went to locate the car, while I remained with the 3rd. I expressed my gratitude to the dispatcher and a supervisor. A state trooper then escorted me home after I provided a statement. I was never contacted for follow-up or to testify, leading me to believe the individual was not apprehended. Years prior, my friend Teus and I embarked on the Great American Road Trip, planning a 6-week zigzag journey from New York to Los Angeles. Being in our early 20s and financially constrained, and given my mother's background as a long-haul trucker, I suggested we save considerable money by sleeping in the car's back. For hatchback, it was a pretty cozy setup. We bought some blankets and sheets at Goodwill, and it's cut one of them up to make curtains. By the end of the first week, we'd gotten so we could set up camp in about 10 minutes. Luggage moved to the front, curtains up, bedding laid down and out for the night. We slept in the parking lots, free campsites, rest areas, and basically anywhere it seemed safe and semi-legal. There was never a night after the first night where we felt scared until the last week of the trip in Arizona. We were near Flagstaff and had gotten pretty used to our routine. We didn't go on a set schedule and would never drive more than 3 or 4 hours a day, with no destination really in mind. Outside a few must-see landmarks, we drive to places we found the night before on Google and take suggestions from other campers, locals, and people we met. We'd also gotten very good at making friends. We went to Denny's with a group of rednecks. We met at a campsite in the back of their pickup because I got hungry and overheard them saying they were going to go. We met an 80-year-old cowboy who took us out drinking and taught us to line dance at a country bar. Hope you're still kicking. Grandpa Mac played the guitar with some musicians in the middle of a thunderstorm. Got fed breakfast and dinner by tons of campers who invited us to hang out with them, and spent the 4th of July with a family who basically adopted us to the campsite. Grandma gave us some weed candy. Basically, every encounter we had with a stranger was a positive one. This night didn't look to be any different. We found a free campsite on Google and drove up into the woods following our GPS. We were pretty far out of town, and something seemed a little bit off. When we pulled up to the campsite, there was one RV parked and two cars further up in the trees. Pulled up near the RV, and a man opened the door. Tess waved hello, but he simply stared back, his expression blank, as if she hadn't spoken. He slowly closed the door, maintaining eye contact the entire time. We assumed he wanted privacy and thought we might be disruptive. We drove further down the road and found a flat spot to park. Instead of our usual routine of setting up camp immediately while it was still light, we spent time goofing around, smoking, laughing, and taking silly photos. Tess pointed out a campfire further down the campsite, and we decided to introduce ourselves. Over the past 5 weeks, we'd met many interesting people by simply offering them a beer and striking up a conversation. So we wandered over near the campfire. There were 2 men, the owners of the cars we'd seen earlier. They seemed friendly, and we sat down and chat with them. They were drinking and smoking, and we sat down and had a beer with them. One of the men seemed pretty off, and we came to find out that the 2 of them didn't actually know one another. The older man was definitely on some sort of drugs. He was spitting in circles and talking about UFOs. However, he seemed harmless. This left us chatting with a younger man who claimed to be a former park ranger. He was handsome and easygoing, and we spent several hours just chatting about our trip, families, and everything. Then he started talking about the bear. He'd seen a bear earlier in the forest. Tess didn't believe him, and he pulled out his camera to show her photos of it. It was very close to the campsite, and we both were a little freaked out. It wasn't unheard of for one of us to go get up in the middle of the night to use the restroom. So the idea of a bear hanging around in the night spooked us. The ranger just laughed, and then his expression changed completely. It is hard to describe, but his voice seemed somehow cold. He said, "If you get out of your car in the middle of the night, it's not a bear you should be worried about." I kept waiting for the laugh, or for him to nudge Taz with his elbow. It's all a big joke on the foreigner and the city girl, right? He never did. I laughed uncomfortably and made a silly remark about serial killers residing in the woods. My friend also chuckled, bringing up the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We moved on, but within 5 minutes, the ranger brought the topic back, talking about something that involved grabbing us from a car in the middle of nowhere. No matter how hard we tried to change the subject, he kept returning to serial killers. The older man was clearly high at this point, staring at the stars in silence. We just awkwardly laughed, sipped our beer, and tried to steer the conversation elsewhere. Then the ranger slid up and walked towards the cooler for another beer. At this point, it's pitch black out, and I can't see anything outside the circle of light from the campfire. The beer cooler was outside of that circle. Suddenly there was a red in the darkness, and it took a moment for me to realize that it's a camera. The ranger is holding a camera. He had taken a photo of us. I could see the screen on the digital camera lit up. Now it wasn't odd for people we met to ask to take pictures with us. My friend Tease is gorgeous with dark hair and blue eyes like a young Megan Fox, and we were friendly people like having pictures of themselves. It was an entirely strange thing to have this person taking a photo of us without asking or even indicating that's what he was doing. We both froze, staring at him like deer in headlights. Unfazed by our reaction, he merely checked his camera, made some adjustments, and took another photo, this time with a flash. There was no request for us to smile, no suggestion of a group photo, and no explanation whatsoever. Afterward, he simply returned to the fire and sat down. Not a single word was uttered about the picture. At this point, Tiez and I were equally freaked out. We concocted a flimsy excuse about needing to set up our campsite and promptly got the hell out of there. As we stood to leave, the UFO guy smiled and wished us a good night. The ranger, however, looked at us with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes and advised us to be careful out there. There's more than bears in the woods, Every hair in my body stood on end. I wasn't alone in my discomfort either, because Tesla responds out and pulled me away from the campfire towards the car. We rushed back to the car, at which we only found in the dark, by referencing the RV and jump in the front seats. My friend Tease is all but hyperventilating. Why did he take pictures of us? I was shaking. I responded, I read that serial killer sometimes warned their victims. She stared at me for a second and locked the car doors. Do you think he just took victim photos of us? We both freaked out. She's in a full panic and turns the headlights on in the car. I immediately yell at her to turn them off because now he knows exactly where our car is. Remember, we didn't set up camp that night, so we didn't need to tear anything down, so we just put the car in drive and floor it out of the campsite. As we gone into the dirt road, the ranger was walking towards our car with that same cold expression. Surprisingly, this is one of those stories I forgot about until a few days ago when I was talking to a school friend on call, and I got reminded of it. She was pretty freaked out when I told her, and so was I, thinking about it again. This happened when I was roughly maybe 7 or 8, so some of the details are fuzzy, but I remember it pretty vividly. This may seem like unimportant context, but my family had just moved to America, and we're renting the top portion of your regular suburban house in a pretty safe cul-de-sac. I had friends. They were triplets, about 3 or 4 houses down, not far at all. Every day I'd go hang out with him, and around 9 or 10 at night, my older brother, around 11 or 12 I'd say, would make the 2-minute walk and come get me, and walk me home since I was pretty young. One night, he came to get me as usual. The sun wasn't fully down, but it was getting pretty dark. We started down the walk as normal. When he started casting glances over his shoulder, I didn't really notice until he shoved me hard away from the sidewalk end between 2 houses. Each house had a fence that separated their backyard. Not ours, though. And as he made me crouch behind the fence, I remember being really scared, but more so confused, since I had no idea what was going on. More specifically, he was a pretty big prankster. Once he convinced me, my older sister crashed her car into the ocean, so I didn't really believe him when he turned and said, walked behind the houses, I think someone's following us. Looking back, my brother was probably trying to keep me calm, but any composure I had left vanished the moment I turned around. The man was behind the houses, near a fence line, a few houses down. He wore a black hoodie, black sweatpants, and white sneakers. Even with my poor eyesight now, I remember with chilling clarity that his jaw was agape, just standing there, mouth wide open. It was terrifying. Now that I'm older, I wonder if he had a medical condition or was on drugs. But back then, I was convinced I was seeing a demon. My brother, seeing my panic, immediately told me to run as fast as I could to our house. We booked it. Neither of us looked back, but we were scared out of our minds. Like I said, we only rented the top portion of the house, so the bottom with a sliding door in the backyard belonged to some other tenant. I don't remember if she was home or not, but I remember tugging that thing open and locking as fast as I could. And when I looked up, he was there in the yard, only a little bit away from the door, staring at us. I and my brother told my sister and my mother immediately. My father was away on a work trip, but nothing came of it, not until the day after we went to go meet my dad at his warehouse, which had a small live-in portion above it, where we laid around until he was ready to head home with us around his dusk. He came up and told us we might have to wait since the police were here. He walked us around to the back window of the small area to show us police all around the backyard area, the warehouses. There are a few in a line, to a white van parked on the grass by the edge of the woods. Like I said, I was pretty young, so I don't remember many details of what actually happened, but I do remember my dad, who hadn't been told about the day prior, telling us that they found a man and a woman in the van. The man, he said, had his mouth hung wide open. He seemed really disturbed, telling me about the whole thing. Wouldn't answer any more questions about the woman. Maybe she was dead. I've got zero idea. I do know they were arrested on trespassing charges. I don't know anything else, and I haven't asked about it, and I doubt he'd remember. It's been over a decade, and he's pushing 70, but it freaks me out to this day. I still can't believe it happened, and I don't have any answers for it. I talked to my brother briefly about it, in hopes he remembered more than I do, but all I got back was a long tirade about whatever medical condition the guy probably had for his mouth to be like that. He was an annoying medical student. Sometimes I consider that he might not have intended any harm and was simply high, but this incident occurred in the safest neighborhood globally and offers no explanation for his presence at my father's workplace. This happened when I was 19 or 20. I'm 31 now and rarely drink or go out. However, last weekend a friend I hadn't seen in years invited me out, and we ended up at a club on the very street where this story takes place. The surroundings reminded me of it. The legal drinking age in Brazil is 18. People here begin partying quite early. And let's be honest, no one truly knows their limits when they first start drinking. My friends and I had gone to this particular club. I honestly can't recall its name now, but I know it shut down a couple of years ago. We had an amazing time. The sun was rising as we were leaving. Most clubs here give you a credit card when you walk in, where you either put in the money you plan on spending, or they work as a personal digital tab where bartenders add up what you're drinking, and you pay for it. On the way out, I paid for my stuff and sat outside to wait for my friends who were taking a long time to get out, probably due to being drunk a fan. As I'm sitting there, I noticed a car across the street, 2 dudes sitting in the front seats, one out of the car, trying to make this clearly drunk out of her mind. Girl, get inside as well. She's mumbling, stumbling, struggling to keep her eyes open, and she's saying, no, I don't want to go, over and over, shaking her head, clinging onto the car door, as the guy keeps telling her to let go and get inside, that they're just going to her friend's apartment to drink some more. It'll be fun. Come on. I watch, wondering if I should do something, if no one else is seeing this happening. I look at the club security guard, and he looks at me and shrugs, like it's not his responsibility. I look back at the girl, and I'm really uncomfortable, but also scared. My friends are still nowhere to be seen. I'm alone. The security guard is clearly not doing anything, and there are 3 of the guys. What if they decide to try and get me too? The girl says one more time that she doesn't want to go with them, and before I realize what I'm doing, I'm getting to my feet and shouting, "Hey!" The guy stops trying to push the girl into the car for a moment and looks at me. She said she doesn't want to go. Dude, I say, starting to make my way across the street, even though my hands are shaking and my voice is probably not the most convincing. She's our friend. She's just drunk and being cranky. It's all good. We're just gonna take her home. He says. He seems a bit nervous and not exactly angry, which makes me feel a bit better or less scared. Do you know them? I ask her, and she shakes her head no, using the door for support to stay on her feet. Creep number 1, the one who was trying to push her into the car, looks at me. They're not his friends, he says, seemingly frustrated, but then starts saying, come on man, let's go, just leave it. Creep number 1, now looking a bit pissed off, grabs the girl and pushes her towards me before getting into the car, and they all leave. The girl nearly falls on her face, but I grab her, and we walk back to the front of the club, our hearts slowly returning to a normal rate. Only then do I realize my friends had come out and were watching everything from across the street with confused faces. We all meet random people at clubs, at the door, and walking down the street. So you probably thought I'd met someone. I started asking her what happens if she's alone, and where all our stuff is, and she's an incoherent mess, mumbling about losing track of her friends in her purse. She doesn't even know how she paid her tab to leave. I asked for some help from the security guard. He says he can't leave his spot and that he can't do anything. I explained what's going on to my friends, and they talk to the hostess about it, who begrudgingly goes and checks to lost and found. Her purse is thankfully there, minus the money she had in her wallet, and we managed to call her parents. I talked to her mom because the girl can't explain anything, and I promised to stay there until the mom comes to get her. 30 minutes later, the mom arrives, and I've never seen someone look so relieved and terrified at the same time. She thanks me and my friends profusely and offers us a ride home, but as we live in the next town over, she just drives us to the subway station in the middle of all the craziness. I forgot to exchange numbers with any of them, so I've never heard of that girl or her mom again, but I hope she learned to be more careful with how much she drinks or who she talks to in clubs. Our friends also bear some responsibility for not watching out for her or trying to find her once they realized she was gone. Perhaps they were as compromised as she was. It's hard to say. My subsequent action was likely reckless, but I couldn't have just watched that car drive away and lived with myself.